We wanted to start off with internal communications. It's very important to keep your team informed during times like these. And the first thing you want to communicate is that you care about what's going on with your employees. Everyone on your staff is a person that is dealing with this crisis, whether it is having a loved one or a friend who has fallen ill, or having a toddler or fourth grader running around their home while they're trying to get work done. They are impacted. They may even have a spouse out of work and be financially strained. So just try to think about all the different positions that people may be in. They may feel vulnerable or be more vulnerable to becoming ill themselves. So they'll want to know how you're protecting them. And certainly PPE is a big part of that, but think about cleanings, resources you have available. One thing Desert Water Agency has done is really promoting the counseling resources that we have available, because people are really struggling with mental health right now as well. So if you have any resources, be sure that you are communicating them. And, thank them for doing their job. Sometimes there's the philosophy of, you shouldn't thank people for just doing what they do to get paid. That's why they get paid. But they're reporting in despite an increased risk right now. And so it's important to let them know that you acknowledge and appreciate that. It's also great to ask for their flexibility, because you're going to need it. Times are changing so quickly. What is a rule now could be different an hour from now. And we're all trying to pivot as organizations. So just let them know that you're going to need and hope for their flexibility during this time. Setting expectations is equally important. This can mean a variety of things. Response time, maybe staff are on an alternating schedule, but they're on call. And if you need to call someone in, what's an adequate time for them to report to work? Maybe it's work tracking. If they're working from home, do you expect them to compile a list of things they've done for the day? Is it okay to have a very generic list of maybe 4 or 5 items, or do you want a line item list of everything done? If you're having a meeting, do you expect them to have their video shared so that you can interact with them face to face? That will change the way that they prepare for their day. Attire. If you're holding a virtual board meeting, do you want people wearing blazers? Do you want are polos okay? Be clear that, pajamas are not. So it's really good to set those expectations, and then make sure that you're breaking down the policy and operational changes. Give examples. Examples are really helpful for people, because you may think you're being clear, but it can, the way one person reads it can be very different from another. So have several people involved, several people reading and reviewing, and examples are helpful. So what tools should you use? Your general manager is a really important resource right now. That is the leader of your organization. The board of directors is obviously a very important asset right now, but when it comes to communicating with the staff, the GM is the most appropriate avenue. Regular updates from the GM are great. And even if the GM cannot send something out himself, if you can distribute the message and say, this came from the office of the general manager, and have perhaps his signature on the document. Video is a great tool for some, but not everyone videos well. So if you know that your general manager isn't as comfortable on video, or maybe not as tech savvy, maybe that's not the right way to go. Human resources can be really helpful for nitty gritty, more technical messages, how to fill out a time card. If you're using a special code for COVID-19, anything down in the details certainly doesn't have to come from the general manager. And then those frequently asked questions are a great way to both set expectations, like we talked about before, and give examples. think about the questions that supervisors at your organization are going to get and try to head them off proactively so that maybe you can avoid some uncomfortable conversations. If you put out a document that lets people know that they still have to abide by the dress code, and there's a frequently asked question about that, it reinforces it, and maybe it prevents additional frustration or uncomfortable conversations down the road. So how to deliver these messages? Typically when things happen at our agency, at least, an all hands meeting for big updates, but not in the time of COVID. So you got to get creative, and we have over communicate as, the key message here, because more is more right now. Less is not more. People in your agency, maybe they don't check email very often. Maybe some of them are more inclined to go onto your agency's intranet if you have one. Maybe they communicate best by phone. We're all different in the way we prefer receiving communication, and redundancy is good because then it really drives the message home. Make sure you take advantage of things like virtual meetings. If you have the technology, it's pretty easy to roll out and implement. Jennifer did a great job last week of outlining that. And then unions and employees associations. These are really great resources to make sure that you get that information out and that they're involved in the process so that there's a little bit of buy-in there. And then make sure you're open. Maybe even an employee's Facebook group to keep people connected and well. Think about those employees that you have that are single. Maybe they're at home and they don't have anyone there. Maybe they have a cat or a dog, but that's about it. And they're definitely in a different position than someone with a spouse and a brood of kids. So think about what you can be doing to try to maintain the feeling of cohesion of your workplace as well. So why does it matter? Safety is obviously important. Morale, performance, compliance, optics, legal. You could get into a situation where if you're allowing people to come in and not wear a mask, or come in even though they are not feeling well, you may have an OSHA violation issue or a risk of a lawsuit if someone does become ill. And it also matters because, the community cares about essential workers. Unlike ever before, we have had people asking how our employees are being protected. And that's really great. And obviously, as employees, people should care about that as well. So moving on from internal audiences, we're now getting into external. What should we say to the community? Again, same as with internal, starting with a message that you care what's happening to the community, to local businesses, letting them know that water is safe and reliable, communicating things like the CDC advisory to flush water in buildings that have been sitting dormant for a while. Make sure that you're staying on top of those key messages that should get out there, because the last thing we need right now is for your community to be concerned about a water quality issue during this public health emergency. We have been pretty intentional about sharing photos from our laboratory, things that reinforce safety, employees wearing masks and gloves. We've also shared some of our policies with not only the media, but with customers and on our website for people to see what we're doing, so that they know, if they know that you can tackle the small stuff, then they feel more comfortable that the bigger safety issues are handled. So these are kind of my lessons learned so far. We started out with messages kind of referring to us all being in the same boat. Now, a lot of people have pointed out that that's not really fair to say. Maybe we're all weathering the same storm, but our boats might be very different. I talked earlier about a single person at home by themselves. People are having mental health issues. People are having financial issues. The impacts to each person, each employee, each customer is going to be very different. So we've been pivoting to a message of stay healthy and well. It communicates care without bringing up equity issues. At first, working to protect our team was a core message. And, that message is still resonating pretty well. But as this crisis continues and more people are facing serious financial hardship, public employee scrutiny is going to increase. We see that in recessions, and we certainly expect to see it now. So, we want to show our team's here for you, and, we're safe and hard at work, and showing images of your team, down in a pit, digging out access to a pipe. Wonderful, and then they've got a mask on, pure gold. So, just be mindful that public agencies are not feeling pain the same way as some businesses or some families are. We had a customer call us, and he was frustrated. He had to lay off his whole staff at his restaurant, and he saw that we had people out working, and he said, "Why aren't we laying people off?" So, people in times like this want to see that the pain is shared. So that kind of brings us to financial considerations. If you have not cut costs yet, definitely something to start thinking about, because your budget probably will be impacted by COVID-19 to some extent. And even if it's not, the optics of it are really important. If you have a cost of living increase on the table right now, maybe it's not the right time to approve something like that. Certainly you may have some contractual agreements, and just be mindful that anything you do related to cost right now, even if it's a critical infrastructure project, it's going to be under some additional scrutiny. So think about how you're going to message that. Emphasize long-term cost savings, emphasize the importance and safety of what you're doing. If you can still pay your water bill, you want to let people know to do that too, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to start getting back to normalcy when it comes to shutting people off for non-payment. And one thing we're seeing so far is that not a lot of people are asking for payment plans right now. And our fear is that when we do get to the point that we have shutoffs again, we're going to have people that have amassed maybe $1,000 worth of payments due. And of course, we'll have payment plans and work with them, but even that extra burden on them when they're already financially strapped will be really hard. So if you have any resources for the community, make sure you're communicating those as well. So who should you be talking to externally? Cities, counties, legislators. If you can talk to your Chamber of Commerce, any sort of associations, whether they're civic associations, business associations, they will help you spread the word out to their membership. So take advantage of that and streamline your work. Media is the same thing. Talking to one person is like talking to 1,000 or more sometimes. Talk to anyone who will experience an outage during the pandemic. Our agency was doing some work in some neighborhoods, and we had to shut the water off for an hour or two. Normally wouldn't be a very big deal, but right now people are using their water for hand washing and cleaning their homes and staying clean. And we want to make sure that they know that the water is shut off for a specific reason and that it will be back on very soon, and they can fill a bucket up if they need to for the interim. So communicating is good, but think about how you do it. Going to the door and knocking to tell them like you used to may not be the right way. You may have to come up with a new procedure for that. And then if anyone's going to be affected by limited services, if you're no longer meeting with developers at your office or no longer doing certain reviews, you need to let those people know. And then anyone you can help. If you have a program that offers help to your customers, get the word out about it. It's really important to share those resources now more than ever. So now we're on to the how. Again, this might be different than in the past. In the past, maybe you would hold a press conference or have a big event to message something, but now you're looking at your website, e-blasts. Physical postings are still important. We found we closed our building, but put messaging up in front of the building to let people know that they could still pay their bill and how to do that. Sending items out in the mail with bills or postcards or what have you, anything you put in print, I would encourage you to link people to your website, because that information can change on the fly. You send something out in the mail and then 2 days later there's a new regulation and you have to change again. That's going to be really confusing. So it's important to put limited information in print and then connect people with the resource that will be up to date. Things are just changing so fast. So, you know, why does it matter? It's a goodwill bank. You know, people at this time really appreciate the additional messaging. And I learned today, a psychologist was talking on a podcast I listened to about how for every one negative thing, you need 4 positive things to overcome it. So if you can put in 2 or 3 or even 4 positive things right now, the next time you go to increase rates, or the next time someone has a negative experience with your staff, you know, you'll have the right ratio there. And maybe you need their compliance. It's important for people to know what your policies are, so that if they're, you know, out and about and a person on your team is doing something, they know why and they don't get frustrated with your staff. Maybe they're frustrated with you and can call you and talk about it, but it's important that your staff has your support in that way. And, you know, in times of hardship, leadership shines. So this is an opportunity. And that's another reason it's important not to go silent. You know, make sure that you're getting the word out there. Our HR manager told me that she heard from a colleague that the new job interview question is, how is your company responding to COVID-19? You know, agencies are being judged by this and probably will be for some time. Brands are being judged by this. So make sure you're not just silent. Fear breeds in silence too. And don't just communicate that you're tightening things up, but when you're loosening things up, it's important to communicate both ways and emphasize safety measures as well, because that's what people are most concerned with right now. And then lastly, we want to talk about context. So make sure that what you're posting is appropriate. If you had anything that was a long time ago, make sure that it's still relevant and doesn't seem tone deaf. Think about photos of large groups. You know, that's probably not something you want to share right now. And think about large gatherings you have planned in the future. Are people going to be comfortable doing that? Can it wait? Is there a way to do it virtually? So lastly, I wanted to tell you these 2 things. You're doing a good job, and I'm here if you need help. It feels pretty good to hear that, right? So say those things. Say them at home, to your family, at the office, to your customers, to neighbors. I've found a lot of reassurance in that. I say it to myself too. So you can always say it in the mirror.